Welcome to our class. We will now look at user testing. We're still kind of at the surface, but here again, user testing can be conducted pretty much at all planes, and it should be conducted early and often. Usability testing, user testing. We're going to look at what it is, why it's important, the benefits it offers, how to do it, and when to do it. I kind of just told you. User testing or usability testing is actually watching the user interact with your product. It can be a physical product such as a coffee maker, it can be a computer, some kind of software, a website, so that we can make improvements and learn what changes we need to make. And this saves development time and money. If you test little parts of your application as you're developing it and find out where to make the improvements, it certainly saves time and money in the long run than having to do it after you roll the product out and there's all kinds of problems in it. Usability testing shows you how people behave. So it's based on behavioral data as opposed to surveys. Surveys tell you how people think. Not to say that surveys aren't good. Also, here again, depending on your product, you can use them both. Surveys are based on opinion and thought, and we all take surveys after we do something on the internet a lot. But user testing more specifically looks at the behavioral data, because it's based on fact, not guessing. It saves development time and money if it's done early and often. It's important because it will find out if you're meeting your user's needs. Here again, back to the user, back to the goals. Does your product behave as they expect? Does it provide what they need? You can kind of determine this by different little tests that you can conduct with the user. Therefore, it reduces development cost, time, very likely could increase revenue because you're not paying people as long to develop the product. User relationships will be better, the goodwill, and less tech support will be needed if things work right. Usability testing can be done with representative users who represent a group, where you would be observing realistic tasks. You can ask questions afterwards, and sometimes you might want to offer them some kind of compensation. It is generally done face-to-face with one-on-one or with a small sample. It can be done in an office or in another natural setting. It should be done early. You can start when you're designing your sketches, when you're designing your wireframes. And this is where we have alpha and beta versions of software being rolled out. We haven't finished, we're testing. After the test, you would ask questions, you might give some compensation, and you might want to continue with the testing as you make the improvements. The whole development team would be involved with this. You would probably have several people observing, or at least maybe watching, and then you would look at the changes and prioritize what you're going to be working on. Some basic points that you would be normally observing in user testing: the efficiency. How long does it take the user to do something? The effectiveness. Did they do it? Were there problems? Here again, the satisfaction, the attitude. How did the user feel during this? Here again, early, often, and even after production. You generally have the usability testing set up in 3 different phases: the pre-test, the test itself, and the post-test. The pre-test is important. This is where you're going to identify the participants, and you're going to think about what are we going to test, and you need to set the test up. Then we have the test session itself, and now the post-test is the analysis or the reported findings. What did we learn, and what are we going to do about it? Alright, so we need to find the suitable participants, make sure, determine the right tasks, and determine the suitable environment for this test. It's going to have to be moderated somehow, whether or not we involve team members, and we have to make sure that the participant is at ease. Afterwards, we analyze the information, and we use that data to make changes in our product. Here again, very user-centered, based on the user. Okay, back to the pre-test. Determining participant characteristics. Oh my goodness, it's based on our persona. We're going to find participants who match our persona. The tasks that we will be conducting need to be based on our goals and objectives. Now, depending on the situation, you might be able to recruit existing customers, or you could actually opt for volunteers. You always want to make sure you're screening participants and narrowing down, and you might want to provide some kind of motivation for the people to want to spend their time. Alright, now, do we need a lot of participants? No. The average rule of thumb is 5. 5 users generally trap about 80% of the issues. You don't get that much more benefit from more users. So save your time and save your money. 5 seems to be good. It's better to conduct a small test and then fix the issues, and then run another small test to see if those issues are fixed or if there's any other issues, than to run one large long test. So one large long test before you roll the product out is not a good idea. Small test, fix. Small test, fix. Our goal in user testing is to identify and fix barriers to people using your product. When we conduct the test, we need to determine what questions we want answered. And I don't mean asking the user necessarily a question. I mean, what questions do we want answered based on the task we want them to perform? So we turn those questions into tasks for the user, and they have to be broad enough so that you can see how the participant will behave and think. All right, and you need to let the participant have some kind of idea of what they're supposed to be doing. Here's an example. All right, this is an Expedia example. All right, supposing you wanted to find out how the user approaches a task. This is kind of a scenario of what you might say. All right, or not say, you would actually have these instructions written down in front of the user, but that's coming. All right, you want to book a trip, 3-day trip to Seattle for 2 people in June. Your travel dates are flexible, your budget's $1,500, you need travel and accommodations. Use this site to find a suitable option. So you have some guidelines, some parameters, and by sitting and watching how the user approaches the task, you learn about whether your application is easy to use. Did they know where to click? Did they know how to go about this task? This is an example of what we mean by usability testing. How easy is it to use a product by simulating a realistic example, a scenario that a typical user would have based on the goals and objectives of your product. All right, you might want to know about a specific feature. Here's an example. Use the flexible flight feature. All right, well, this is a feature in Expedia to find the cheapest flight from LA to Seattle during the second week of June. All right, you might be rolling out this new feature. How easy is it to use? Well, let's see how easy it is for this user to figure this out. Sometimes you just might want to know a first impression of something. and you might have some instructions to the user. Take a couple of minutes and tell me what you think the site's about and what you can do on this site. Perfect! You should do this for every product. Feel free to scroll around, but stay on the page, whatever. So you need to have guidelines and limitations. But yeah, just having someone tell you what the site's all about, what they think they can do. Because if they don't know if they can't figure out our goals and objectives, then I guess we didn't do a good job of putting them forth. Okay, the test environment itself. All right, it should be near the workplace. It should be a good location. Don't frustrate the user having to find your place because they're not going to do a good job in the test. It should be quiet, comfortable, clean of distractions. Make sure that it's scheduled at a good time, that there's ample parking, water, restrooms, etc. So make sure that all the environmental things are not an obstacle. The test moderator should be humble and respectful, observant, patient, and empathetic. All right, and remember, you might get your feelings hurt. The people might not like your product. They might have difficulty. All right, and you can't let on to that. You just have to realize that might happen. Here again, everything should be written. Even if you're talking to the person, welcome, let me thank you for coming here today, etc. Use a written script. You don't want any bias in your test. So we want consistency, no biases, uniformity in what the user will perceive. Use a written script for the task so they can read it. You can read it, but also have it down for them. And you might want to ask them to think out loud. All right, so they might say, all right, well, I'm going to click here to look at the different flight schedules or whatever. All right, that way you don't have to ask them. You want to do as much observing as possible without asking them. Not to say you can't ask. Write down what you see and write down what the participant says. So this is a typical testing situation here. There might be other observers in the same room or watching via camera, or you could videotape it. They can also write down observations and questions, and you can compare your notes. Okay, so here's an example. So here's the test. Remember, you need to tell the participant the study is not a test of them. Okay, it's a test of your product. It's voluntary. They can stop whenever they want. They're not obliged to do anything. They're not required to give personal information. And remember how grateful you are to them for their time. Wrap-up period after the session. Then you might want to ask some additional questions. You might want a survey form. And you might want to have some kind of a compensation, a Starbucks card or something. Here again, if there are other observers, you might want to go over that session before the next participant comes in based on how you're scheduling things, just in case there was an issue, something that you want to fix for the next time. So ultimately, you're going to collect your notes, organize them, identify issues, and talk about solutions. You'll always want to create a report, document the changes, retest after the changes have been made, then create a report again, and note the money saved due to the testing. There's a very nice video here by the author of our book that you should watch to experience a usability testing session.